The movie begins with a video message from a man named Frank, who wants to talk about a future that brings mankind overpopulation, famine, wars, and all kinds of troubles. But as a child, he imagines it to be different. 1964, Frank Walker goes to the New York World's Fair to present his jetpack at an invention contest. Though the jetpack doesn't quite work yet, but it could be an inspiration to others. Competition referee David Nix rejects his project, despite the approval of a girl named Athena, who walks up to them and tells the kid to follow her stealthily and gives him a badge. Frank catches up with Athena's group, for which he has to jump into a boat that takes him to the moving toy pavilion. A laser beam drops on the badge and scans the data, and directs Frank's boat into a secret tunnel. Immediately, an obscure cabin is in front of him, and a pleasant female voice invites Frank inside. All the doors and windows are closed behind him, and the same voice announces this start of the transportation. The cabin shakes violently, but everything quickly ends, and the boy steps outside, finding himself in an unfamiliar place. Seeing Athena board a strange flying machine, Frank rushes after it, but the machine flies away. Frank finds himself on the edge of a pad, when the tentacles of a huge robot appear in front of him. Frank falls to the lower platform, his backpack falls nearby and shatters. The disappointed kid tries to reassemble it, but the reappeared robot does it for him, wielding the pieces back into place. Then he puts it on Frank and gets the approval of the emboldened kid. At this point, people run out onto the platform. Frank awkwardly turns around and drops from a huge height. Suddenly, a view of the Tomorrowland opens up in front of the astonished boy. He puts on his satchel on the fly and turns it on just before hitting the ground. Frank is flying over the city, thrilled by the beauty he sees, when he spots Athena below. He lands in front of the girl and she shows him the town. And then Frank's story is interrupted by Casey Newton. She too wants to tell the story, only from her perspective. The action shifts to the 21st century. In the dark of night, Casey sneaks into the Cape Canaveral spaceport and disables the cranes that are disassembling the platform. After that, she returns home, where she assures her brother that she will not give up on her dream of defending the platform. In the morning, she is on her way to school when her father is informed of the crane's breakdown. But very soon, a replacement will arrive and nothing will stop the platform from being disassembled. Later, sitting in class, the girl listens to all sorts of threats to humanity: nuclear war, climate change, terrifying predictions, and more. But none of the teachers can answer Casey's question: how to fix it all. At night, she drives to the spaceport again and gets caught by the police. They detain her, confiscate her motorcycle, and after booking her, let her go home. While receiving her belongings, she finds an unfamiliar badge among them. Casey picks it up and moves out of the precinct into a wheat field. An unfamiliar city looms on the horizon. She takes a step and finds herself back at the station. Very cautiously, she picks up the badge. On the way home, her father becomes angry with her daughter's behavior. She has trespassed on NASA property, but Casey's only interested in the badge. She reminds her father that he's a space engineer and asks to see the odd object, but the badge has no effect on her father. Casey picks it up again and immediately finds herself flying over the road in the same unknown land, but her father interrupts her visions. At home, the girl realizes that as soon as she picks up the badge, she immediately sees Tomorrowland, and feels as if she's there, though she's in fact still in her own world. And when she tries to go anywhere, she bumps into walls and falls down the stairs. Then she rides out into the field at night and sets out to explore Tomorrowland. When she gets there, she is amazed by the unseen flying devices and the sight of everything around her. The girl runs through the sunny streets, marveling at the wonders. And soon she realizes that she's invisible to those around her. Taking the train to the spaceport, Casey observes the transparent cascading pools with people bathing in them, and looks at the incomprehensible flying machines. But then she notices that her badge is counting down, and then she hears her neighbors talking, from which it becomes clear that the girl is flying away somewhere 20 light years away. She joins a group of young astronauts at the spaceport, but suddenly feels a strange resistance. The next minute she sees that her badge is counted down to 0, and she finds herself on the real Earth, waist deep in a lake. Back at home, she and her brother find an ad for the same badge for sale on the internet, and Casey packs up for the trip. Later, Athena comes to Casey's house to track down the girl. Confessing that she's from the future, the girl gets the truth and rushes to catch up. Meanwhile, Casey arrives at a store that sells vintage objects from the future. The salesman tried to find out how Casey got her badge, and tell her about a group of geniuses, artists, and scientists. The smartest and most talented people on the earth. They create in secrecy, free from politics, bureaucracy, envy, and greed, in order to make a difference in the world. They call themselves Plus Ultra, and you can get into the rest of the city by touching their badge. The next moment she is subjected to a real interrogation. She's asked questions about the location of a girl she doesn't know. And then, they point an unknown weapon at her, which can easily penetrate the roof of the room. Suddenly, a balloon flies into the store. As it unfolds, it paralyzes the clerks, capturing Casey's arm as well. Athena immediately appears, and tells the girl to hurry after her. Waiting for the effects of the bomb to weaken, Athena joins in, and decapitates the woman, who turns out to be a robot. Just as the girls run out into the street, there is an explosion in the store. Athena pushes Casey into a car, parked by the curb, and drives off. On the way, she tells Casey that she was the one who planted the badge on her, but Casey runs off without waiting for her explanation. At this point, Athena begins to glitch, and Casey realizes that the girl is also a robot. Frightened, she jumps out of the car, and bolts. Athena runs out next, and gets hit by a car. The frightened driver rushes to Athena, and Casey jumps into his pickup, and drives away. Athena rushes after her, catches up with the car, climbs in, and pulls out the key. And then, she tries to calm down hysterical Casey. She gave her her last badge. Either she goes with her, or that world dies. Meanwhile, the Secret Service guys arrive at the scene of the explosion. One of the cops picks up the android's charged skull, and the others stare at it in amazement. Then, demand an explanation. But then, a man arrives, who disperses the cops with his weapon, and asks them to inform the governor that the girl has been found. Athena confesses that she has been looking for Casey for a long time, because she's special. So they go to see someone just as special, Frank Walker. Casey wakes up and realizes that she has just been thrown out onto the road. The outraged girl goes to Walker's house, and is attacked by a dog. It tears from its chain, but Casey notices that there are no pull marks on the ground. She realizes it's a hologram, and bravely walks to the door. Casey shows her badge, but an unknown force throws her away from the door, and Frank comes out onto the doorstep. He convinces her to go home, because what she saw was just a commercial. Stubborn Casey refuses to leave, despite the pouring rain. But suddenly, she becomes interested in the many wires stretching out of the house. She walks around and sees many different antennas mounted on the walls and roof, and there is an old tractor standing nearby. The alarm goes off at Frank's house, and he looks outside and sees the car and fire. Grabbing a fire extinguisher of a strange design, the man rushes outside and extinguishes the burning tractor. He immediately realizes that it was a distraction, and Casey has gotten into the house behind his back. The angry man tries to open the door, but is thrown off by his own defense system. Casey, on the other hand, looks at all sorts of incredible devices the house is full of, and finds a strange projector that shows footage of Frank and Athena into Tomorrowland. And then, Casey enters a room with a computer system analyzing world news, while Frank sneaks into the house through a hidden back door. He is terribly angry, and when questioned by the girl confesses that he was simply thrown out of the future. After looking over the hardware, Casey realizes that he has built a machine that predicts a 100% probability of humanity's demise. However, when Casey declares that he should never give up, the prediction suddenly improves by a few thousands of percent. At this point, androids pretending to be representatives of the Secret Service drive up to the house and demand that the criminal be handed over. But Frank closes all entrances. Nevertheless, the robots enter the house, where numerous traps await them, from which they die one by one. Frank falls into the hands of one, and then Casey helps to eliminate the enemy, not even realizing what kind of objects fall into her hands. Frank leads the girl to the second floor, where an android catches up with them. But the inventor activates a magnetic wall, and the robot is simply drawn to it. Still, Frank gets caught by the ringleader, who reads him his rights before destroying the man. Casey takes advantage of this, and smashes the android's head in with a regular bat. The pair go to the bathroom, settle in, and catapult themselves out of the house. After landing in a nearby lake, the humans make their way ashore. And Frank tells her his story of his relationship with his father. He is trying to resuscitate a motorcycle hidden in the bushes, when a car with a thinner at the wheel pulls up to them. Frank does not look happy. He is annoyed that a thinner has dragged Casey into a shell down that doesn't concern her. But the girl refutes him. She's been looking for potential candidates for years, because she still considers herself to be a recruiter. In the altercation, Athena convinces Frank to go back and rectify the situation. Casey doesn't understand what the conversation is about, but she's also in favor of going back. The company arrives at the building where Frank has set up the teleportation station, and Athena informs them that they have to get to the play. Frank dissuades the girl. The robots will surely be waiting for them there. Then, Athena offers to give her the weapon he hides in his briefcase. They will try to make it on their own. Casey tries to ask questions, but Frank grounds her with the message that Athena is just an android and does not care about stupid people. But the recruiter assures her that she was never stupid. Frank declares that he will do everything himself and opens the door to the station. Surprised, Casey climbs into the cabin, where Frank blindfolds her and pours some kind of powder into her mouth. Athena checks some nuts and goes down into the capsule as well. The man sets a course for the tower, and from Athena's response she realizes that she too has been kicked out of Tomorrowland. The machine begins to hum, and after a while the exhausted people get out of the capsule. Casey is terribly thirsty and clutches onto a can of Coke, while Frank hurries the companions. The robots will soon be here. Once outside, Casey is thrilled because they are in the center of Paris, right on the Eiffel Tower. While Casey knocks out the guard, Frank opens the door to a room where the creator of the Eiffel Tower is recreated meeting Jules Verne, Nikola Tesla and Edison, all prominent geniuses of his era. It was Tesla who designed the antenna capable of picking up all subspace frequencies. It is here that there is a secret entrance to the dimension where the city exists. Frank winds up a vintage gramophone and immediately the secret door opens. The delighted girls see the marvels of technology, and the tower immediately begins to port to the sides, and out of the ground rises a rocket. But at that moment, a car with androids rushes up to the bottom of the tower. But Frank, Casey, and Athena are already inside the rocket, which can take them to the right place. One of the robots does make it to the porthole and hits the glass. The rocket takes off, startling the inhabitants of the metropolis. Having flown above the ground, the rocket turns back around. Thus, it enters another dimension. The rocket shakes, and Frank notices the glass cracked by the robot's impact. But passing through the shimmer, the rocket lands in the Tomorrowland. Casey comes to his senses from Athena's voice and gets out and looks around, but it's not the bright and cheerful city she saw once. The futuristic city in reality turns out to be sparsely populated, abandoned, and gray. Seeing the machine flying up to them, Frank hands Athena the mega bomb, and she hides it in her body. The trio is greeted by the head of the city, David Nix. He meets Casey and is struck by Frank's claim that she's the one who can save the world. Everyone flies to the control tower, where the bridge to the land of the present is opened. Everything here is controlled by Nix with a remote control on his arm. He points out the blurry figures to Casey. These are glimpses of the future, something that will happen in a few minutes. The tower converts the energy of Tachyon discovered many years ago. It is with the help of a Tachyon observatory that you can look anywhere on Earth. Casey thinks of Cape Canaveral and operates the equipment herself, which amazes Nix. Sometime later, the company ends up at Casey's house and witnesses her conversation with her father from 3 days ago. So with Tachyons, you can travel to the past and the future. Casey leads everyone into the future and sees the inevitable demise of humanity. She stops at the ruins of her own house and Nix assures her that nothing can be changed. Everything will happen in 58 days, but Nix isn't going to save humanity. If they open the door, everything will happen again in this world. Casey won't put up with it. Frank starts to convince Nix to try to save the world, but he knocks out Frank. He's deported again and Athena informs him about it. He sees desperate Casey and tries to comfort her. But the girl no longer believes his words. Why was she shown that incredible magic world? And suddenly it hits her. How was Frank picking up their signals? One of the control box is a giant batch that broadcasts negativity and convinces people not to fight back. They need to disable the control unit. They are led to Nix, who opens the way for them to Earth, to an island in the ocean so they can live out their days beautifully. Casey and Frank try to get their point across to him. The transmitter is broadcasting inevitability and programming people to die, but the man refuses to listen to them. And Frank realizes this is his idea. Nix confirms all of his attempts to convince people to prevent a catastrophe have run into a wall of incomprehension. 99% of those living in real world instead of action have turned warnings of imminent doom into yet another form of entertainment, disaster movies. So he decided to save those who live in a parallel dimension and show the demise of one world to save civilization. Nix says goodbye to Frank, but Frank presses the key on his bracelet and drags the villain with him to the island, ordering Athena to activate the bomb. The robots that appear try to grab Athena and she throws the bomb to Casey. She herself reprograms the robots, causing them to fight each other while Frank and Nix wrestle in the sand. Casey sees a glimpse of the future in which she activates the bomb and repeats her movements. The platform falls down and Casey loses the bomb. At this point, the door to the shore collapses. Athena manages to open it again. The men run inside and the bomb explodes on the island. Nix's legs get caught under a fallen rack, preventing him from getting out. He reaches for his gun, but Athena sees his would-be shot and manages to cover Frank with her body, taking permanent damage. She says goodbye to Frank, admitting that machines can feel too. She's been looking for dreamers and she found them. Dreamers must stick together. Finally, she asks Frank to use her to destroy the Take-On Observatory, because the bomb is lost. Taking the girl in his arms, Frank flies over the control balloon and fulfills his friend's request. The explosion destroys the observatory and kills Nix. Frank and Casey open a passageway to her father's house, because help from engineers is needed. Then they make new badges for the dreamers. After all, it's not enough to tear down an antenna. You have to build a new one. Their recruiters set out to find new dreamers and creators who are worthy of living in tomorrow's land. That's where the movie ends. Guys, what are your thoughts about the movie? Tell us in the comments section down below. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can get notified when we upload a new video. Thanks for watching.